Hi, this is Dr. Burns. Thanks for tuning in to this brief video. It's going to be a first installment specifically about the power of 501c6 organizations for Michigan LPCs. So, what exactly is a 501c6 organization? Not all nonprofits are charitable organizations. A nonprofit status only indicates an organization isn't operating to generate and distribute profits. So 501c6 nonprofit organizations, they serve either a regional community of businesses or constituents by promoting specific business practices. So the IRS also calls 501c6s business leagues, and that's an association of people with that shared business interest. So, for example, licensed professional counselors have a shared business interest. But, as the name suggests, those interests don't involve profits for the organization or for any of the association's members. So, by definition, 501c6 nonprofits are a collection of individual persons with those common business interests. They can include anything from assisting local businesses in a specific community to building a professional sports team. The IRS defines 501c6 nonprofits to include things like chambers of commerce, boards of trade, professional associations, real estate boards, and professional sports leagues. So, some specific examples of 501c6 nonprofits include Mahaka, the Kalamazoo Regional Chamber of Commerce, and the National Hockey League. So, what are the requirements to qualify to be a 501c6 status? So, the first thing is the organization's purpose must be for the common business interest of an association of persons. It can't be to engage in transactions for profit. Its activities must focus on improving business conditions for an entire industry or businesses within a specific geographic area. And they often offer programs and services for members, including education, and are permitted to engage in political activities. Typically, they're going to be funded by things like member dues, member trainings, conferences, trade shows. Its activities and services must not benefit private shareholders or specific members of the association, and the profits generated by that 501c6 must be used entirely to support the organization's purposes rather than being distributed back directly to members or any specific group of members of that association. So what's shared with you on this particular slide is an exact quote from the IRS about 501c6s, and you can see that at the address that I've listed at the bottom of the slide. But no part of a business league's 501c6's net earnings may inure to the benefit of any private shareholder or individual, and it may not be organized for profit to engage in an activity ordinarily carried on for profit, even if the business is operated on a cooperative basis or produces only enough income to be self-sustaining. So I would imagine that that quote, especially the word inure, you may be confused as to what exactly does that mean. A 501c6 will jeopardize its exemption under Section 501c6 of the Internal Revenue Code if it ceases to have as its purpose promoting the common business interests of persons engaged in a specific line of business. Very importantly, its net earnings may not directly financially benefit any of its members. The inurement prohibition prohibits a tax-exempt organization, that's any nonprofit, but that includes a 501c6, from using any revenue or assets to excessively benefit an individual that has a close relationship with the tax-exempt organization or an individual who can exercise significant influence over the organization. Additionally, nonprofit organizations are subject to the non-distribution constraint, which means that essentially they cannot distribute profits to individuals who are in control of the organization itself. The non-distribution constraint is a major difference between nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations. And you can read more about that and what the IRS has to say about that at the link that I've provided below. Their 501c6s must operate with complete transparency in their financial records. One example is that it has to make its last three informational tax returns public. If somebody asks for copies, the 501c6 has to provide them free, except for enough to cover reasonable reproduction, copying, and/or postage costs. So we've already discussed that a 501c6 must refrain from activities that generate substantial business profit and refrain from allowing the revenue generated to benefit one or even a few members. A 501c6 must manage the activities and funds to maintain a trustworthy public perception, and that is a requirement of the IRS. So let's talk for a minute about what are the benefits then of being a 501c6 organization specifically. Well, first, you do get to enjoy tax exemption. So when you're a 501c6, you don't have to pay taxes. The benefit allows the organization to dedicate their capital and expenses solely to growing their nonprofit organization and serving the association's members. But donations that are made to a 501c6, they aren't tax deductible. That can at times hurt a 501c6's fundraising efforts. However, because 501c6s are membership driven organizations and you're being a member of the association because it's about how you're making your living. When you become a member of a 501c6, what you're paying in dues, you can deduct as a business expense. It's not, you can't deduct it as a charitable um, deduction. And if you were to give that association, that 501c6, any additional monies, you could not claim that as a charitable deduction at that point. The second thing, and a big thing for us as LPCs in the state of Michigan, that you get to do with a 501c6 is you get to perform unlimited lobbying. And so there's no holes barred on lobbying for things that are relevant to the organization's purpose. So, for example, if a nonprofit represented LPCs in the state of Michigan and they were a 501c6, then they could lobby for protecting the scope of practice of LPCs in Michigan, which is why you do care as an LPC in the state of Michigan that there is a 501c6 organization that can lobby for you. Next, it does allow you to participate in political campaigns, and that means that and be a part of political activity. A 501c6 does have to report these business activities and the expenses to their members, but they can donate to specific candidates' election campaigns and things along those lines. That goes hand in hand with the unlimited lobbying, and that is actually critically important for there to be a 501c6 organization for LPCs in Michigan. The last thing that it does protect donors. Now, again, I've said that if you donate to a 501c6, you don't get to write that off as a charitable deduction, but people can choose to donate because of the political activity or the lobbying that is going on. Um, and 501c6 does actually offer the protection of people who have given money to the 501c6 that they don't have to be publicly listed or known. So it does offer that kind of an added benefit. Okay, so the bare bones basics that are required by the IRS to form a 501c6, you got to have a couple of things. One is you do have to form a board. That board has to be made up, board of directors. It has to be made up of at least three members. Um, there are rules about who can and cannot be on the board. There are rules about what certain responsibilities should be. Um, 501c6s really want board members familiar with whatever that target industry is and the constituents. So that for us would be counselors and the clients the counselors serve so that they can understand the problems faced by that group of people, which here we're talking about LPCs. The second thing they have to have is they have to have bylaws. Um, which have to fall in line with what the IRS says a 501c6 is and can do. And the bylaws show the IRS, the organization's motives, and how the organization operates. Um, you know, 501c6s, they aren't even required, they're not required to have any kind of staff, they're not required to have an executive director. Sadly, very often with our counseling associations, we often don't have the financial resources to really have um, executive directors or even full-time executive directors, and that's just sad. But you have to focus mostly on what it is that serves the members of the organization. So I thought I'd briefly just compare, 501c3s are the things that most people are familiar with and compare that to a 501c6. Um, both are not-for-profit organizations. 501c3s are charitable organizations, and a 501c6, those organizations promote a common business interest. Um, so therefore, both organizations do receive tax exemption from federal taxes. And I'm not going to go into this here because it's getting down a little too much into the weeds, but 501c6 nonprofits are sometimes subject to state and local taxes, and that's really based on where they are located. A third difference between them is political lobbying. 501c3s can advocate for causes but have restrictions and limitations on political lobbying, while 501c6 nonprofits can engage in unlimited political lobbying activity, which you really need your state counseling association to be able to do for you as an LPC because you need to protect the license of LPCs. And then also, you need to be able to lobby for the welfare and well being of the clients that counselors see in the state. Another difference, 501c3 organizations cannot participate at all in political campaigns, but 501c6s can. And I've alluded to earlier the fact that, if you can get individuals into office that will help forward legislation for the scope of practice of LPCs or for client populations that counselors serve, then that becomes important for an organization to be able to do. And then lastly, 501c3 organizations, they have to disclose donors' identities to the public, but a 501c6 nonprofit has the option to protect anybody who gives them money and they're not paying a membership due. They can keep that personal information confidential.